Hey, well, welcome to another episode of Forums, where we bring Black professionals together across industries. And I'm excited to have all these great professionals join us from social services. And today our topic will be social services, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives, your insights, and just hearing some of your experiences within social services. And without further ado, let's just get started with our introductions. And on my far left is Ellen. So I'll start with Ellen. We'll go around.
Awesome. I was hoping I wasn't first, but that's cool. So yeah, my name's Ellen Oaken. I am an anti-Black racism facilitator. I've been doing the work for a few years now. I'm also the creator of a thing called Think Black. And yeah, I'm really excited to meet all of you and see what kind of expertise that you guys have and how we can move forward.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll move over to Jabari.
Sure. Jabari Lindsay, currently the manager, shucks, I just lost my title for a second there. Employment and Social Services with Toronto Employment and Social Services. The office I work out of is in Lawrence Heights. And I've been with the city for, my son's turning 12. I've been with the city for 12 years. I measured by my first son because I had him as I entered the city. So looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Jabari. And we'll move over to Avil, please.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Orville Wallace. I am a youth advocate, I would say. I'm champion of young people working in the social services sector for about the past 20 years, working with youth in conflict with the law specifically, but mainly youth facing multiple barriers. I would say definitely part of my passion is definitely providing access to information and sharing resources with the sector through my youth justice network, but also my other hat within nonprofit leadership and philanthropy leadership. So definitely bringing an equity lens to leadership as within the Black community and being a voice for that throughout my career.
Excellent. Thank you. And for myself, I'm Kevin, and I'm a management consultant, and I'm the founder of Kamau Consulting Group, where we focus on a strategic approach to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And what we do is simply just work with our clients to ensure that we have inclusive participation for our clients within their sectors, be that be in public or private sectors. Without further ado, just in consideration of time, we're just going to jump into the agenda that I set out. And we'll perhaps start from there, and I'll take this back to Ellen. What are some of the challenges you have faced in your journey as a Black professional in or interacting in social services?
Yeah, so I think I have the unique experience of being well, not just unique to myself, but as a Black female, being in this field. So prior to me becoming an anti-Black racism facilitator with the YMCA GTA, I was working at a correctional facility. And I did share a little bit with you, Kevin, but for those that are not familiar, working in a correctional facility, as you can imagine, is pretty horrible, especially as an education coordinator, where I felt like there was a lot of friction between myself and the guards. There just wasn't any cohesiveness in what our, I guess, the ultimate goal would be for the inmates. For me, it was just trying to create, or have inmates that were able to be citizens that could provide back to the community upon their release. But that whole concept of rehabilitation doesn't sit well with a lot of with guards. So for me, it was a lot of that resistance. And then it just became like a rumor mill for me, as a young Black female. There was a hypersexualization and the hyposexualization in that space for me. And it became very problematic and very difficult to more or less navigate because I was working there independently. So I was working with the school board, but they were not actually in the facility. So that is definitely a big challenge that I have faced as well. Also, when it comes to social services, what I have experienced is that in the not-for-profit world, there is this idea of this connotation that, we're inclusive, we're equitable. And because they like to champion those ideals, they often are the worst perpetrators of being divisive or being exclusive, right? When it comes to that sort of thing. So although they had this mantra nobody was really willing to do the work because they thought they had already figured it all out. Right? In social services, what I've really recognized, and Orville, I can actually empathize with you because a lot of what I was doing as a youth outreach worker was working in the courts, in the Brampton courts and the two in Finch. What I saw was that there was a lot of politicizing of the Black bodies, right? So we need target numbers. We need to get our funding or sustain our funding by getting numbers. So the easiest way to do that is to go into at-risk communities where we know Black youth are disproportionately represented, right? To get them to come into these programs, but there's no longevity, there's no retention. So when I try to voice that, like, hey, why don't we find systems or opportunities for these young people to actually retain employment or to actually stay out of the criminal justice system, it was always met with, well, we're doing the best that we can. If we help one life, that's all that matters, right? So there was no profit, more or less, for them to actually invest in these young people or in these communities. And that was a challenge. It became like an inner struggle. My moral compass was kind of like, and it kind of felt like we were selling a Ponzi scheme. And that became problematic for me. So that's some of the challenges that I've faced.
Thanks for sharing that. You bring up some really interesting points, which I think I'll unpack maybe on the second question. But before I unpack that, I'd want to hear some, everyone's experience. So I'll take this next to Jabari, perhaps.
Sure. And want to give credit to Ellen for really kind of identifying one of the cruxes of, I think, all of our problems is that the one piece I wrote about in terms of my journey is that you're chosen as the solution to the problem that you didn't create in the first place. And that it's a problem that you ultimately are facing as well. So I would say that that's probably one of the biggest pieces of my, biggest challenge I faced in my journey was when I was working with young people who were identified as gang members for a long while. Really the problem started high school, elementary school, daycare. Their parents were coming to the country and had a hard time migrating into the system. But it was always, let's deal with the now. So whatever the situation is that they're going through right now, and not the creators of said problems. And again, me being usually the youngest person in the room in these kind of situations, I'm like, I'm going through this too. And now you are hiring me to help my peer. And I have no more power than that person other than I'm getting a salary and they're not. So the biggest, I guess, challenge I faced along the journey was just trying to understand, trying to make sure I kept in my head, how much of this can I actually do personally? And again, just kind of echoing off of Ellen's points, lots of great ideas, lots of things that I thought I could do, but I had zero power and opinion in most circles that I was in. And in my version of the journey, I guess, I've always tried to strive to get to the bigger pond. So when I was working in Rexdale, I said, when I was working in Malton, if I start from there, I thought, okay, I want to work with people longer. So then I go to another program. Okay, longer doesn't work. Let's go diverse. Then you go to another program. Okay, that doesn't work. Maybe if I work for the government and start a program, that'll work. Nope. Okay, what if I fund programs? Will that work? Nope. Because ultimately the problem isn't any of these solutions, it's the system. So I think for my journey, the more I walked, the more I realized there's a super machine churning all of this stuff out, and either I'm committed to shutting down the machine, or I'm just swimming in the water that the machine is churning, and trying to raise my children within that. So I think I'll stop there. That's my particular version of the journey. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Jabari. And you bring up some really interesting points that I'm going to pick up also on the second question. I'll move over to Orville, please.
Thanks. All great points. I definitely would echo a lot of the same sentiments from Ellen and Jabari. I just build in terms of how the conversation's going. I would say in terms of answering the question, in terms of challenges we faced as a Black professional interacting in the social services. So I'll start with the place of the system wasn't created for us in the first place. So acknowledging that, and what are some of the issues that we have to unpack. So knowing that a system that oppresses Black people is not a problem for Black people to fix. It's actually a problem for the gatekeepers of the system to fix. So number one, acknowledging that, but also looking at how recognizing that it's been over time a time to really recreate a more inclusive era. So I would say in terms of breaking that down, so what that means, finding a mentor, or one of the challenges I've found personally is finding a mentor or a sponsor within the workplace, distinguishing between someone who celebrates your work and someone who's actually invested in your work, someone who actually is saying, I'm championing this person, and rather than, you know what, he does great work, let's just give him a high five and that's it. But we actually are missing those people in the workplace that are invested in our work and really are championing that work. I'd also acknowledge, and I believe Ellen touched on this as well, and is that concept of neutrality and how that is within the workplace. So we've actually built our systems as if they're neutral, and as if there isn't actually any anti-Black racism, and that exists within all our systems, whether it's philanthropies, nonprofits, education, justice, child welfare. So when it comes to discipline, or for example, important decision making, we've left it up to those in charge to make those decisions for us. So, and those same people are coming in with their own mental models and impressions of Black individuals, Black males, Black females. So that's a big problem in itself. So breaking down the concept of the reality is for that we know as Black people is that it isn't actually a level playing field. So that concept of neutrality is so ingrained in all these systems. I'll touch on just another topic, halfway commitments, and how that's hurt Black people over the years. So there's that notion of us being chosen to be the problem solvers for the problems that we didn't create. But then when we do come in and solve and problem solve and actually bring in recommendations, there actually isn't any action towards these recommendations. So the commitment is more of performative commitment rather than an actual action-based commitment. So we're now moving past that place of performative allyship to now getting to that sense of being an actual person that will put their life and safety on the line for Black people, because we really are in serious times right now where we're seeing we're seeing more and more Black youth, adults suffering from mental health, getting killed by police, by all our systems. So we really have no time to waste on that notion as well. I'll just jump into touch on leadership and why that's important. And for me, leadership is everything. We need to stop promoting people who don't even like people and aren't even invested in people. We have to start looking at promoting people who are actually in positions that are doing credible work, valuing people's contributions, and are really invested in the success of others. So getting comfortable in uncomfortable conversations, having leaders that are able to have those brave to be able to facilitate brave conversations. And that's what we need. We need more brave leaders. We need leaders who actually are not going to talk the talk, but walk the walk, and recognize that, we not just bringing us to the table, but acknowledging that we actually are the ones that contributed to putting the legs on the table and helping them stand. So we actually need more leaders to really implement more of our knowledge and value our input in the workplace.
Well put. Thanks for sharing that. I'll take this over to Senor now. We were doing our introductions, and just if you can provide your experiences within social services as well, please.
Thank you. And I echo and I agree with all of what three of you have shared. I think it's very impactful, and it really speaks to my own experience too in the in the child welfare and also in mental health. So having worked in both systems, I totally understand and see how what you have shared fits what I've personally gone through, and I've seen my own people go through the same experience. And I think for me, one of my biggest challenge that Ovila shared, and I think Jabari has also shared, has been us trying to fit in a system that wasn't created for us. And I think, to me, that's the biggest challenge. Like, you see everywhere you go, they tell you they have services for you, but when you look at the services they have, the model in place is actually not meant for you. It doesn't benefit you. It benefits the people who are providing the service. But in essence, it's not actually culturally based or sensitive to your own needs. So therefore, you sit there, they want you to just sit there as a number so they can have the number saying that we gave somebody this service, but in essence, it didn't really actually benefit you as a service recipient. And for me, that has really been one of the challenges I've faced. And sitting at the table, when they do call you to sit at the table, many of the times, you are sitting there not as the person who can, if I use the analogy of Lumumba in this sense, like, you are the food being eaten. It's not like you are the person eating the food. And that's, to me, it's one of the challenges I see oftentimes in social services. They claim they're so inclusive, they want you to be there, they want to understand. It's the language of social work, especially. So people who really want to be more anti-oppressive, because that's the language they're using. But the actions and the impact of their actions are way much worse than the intention they are somehow portraying to many of us who are Black, and it causes more harm than helping us. And I think, for me, that has really been one of the struggles, and also wanting to move from being a worker or a staff to management becomes a huge barrier, because you don't even have anybody in the agency who looks like you, who holds any of the position of power somewhere there. So therefore, you don't even have anybody who can provide mentorship for you to be able to move and to know when positions are coming out, because many of times they're not even shared by everybody else except this last minute. So the ones who have their people in those positions get to know when they're coming out, and they're already been positioned well to be able to take those positions. So therefore, many of us found ourselves stuck in doing the same job over and over, but not actually being represented where people have to make decisions. And because we are not sitting where decisions are made, so we are more just impacted by what somebody else is deciding on our behalf. And we all know when people are not including you in the decision they are making for you, then they're doing it against you, which is, we pay the consequences of them deciding on our behalf, which we see in the child welfare system, for example, overrepresentation of Black children in care. And then we see more of Black youth are being placed with white families who don't even know what to do with us in the first place. And then all these issues arise from there, and we see more of our youth, and many of us struggle with identity issues because we don't even have anybody who can truly understand who we are and understand our own needs, and decide to bring up services that really match with the needs we do have, instead of the model they have in place about numbers. So I guess for me, it feels as if I'm just a number to the system instead of being a human being with so much value and so much more to offer to address some of the issues. I'm just a number to them. So I'm a number, they get the money because I'm a number. The more numbers they have of us, it gives the system the money that they need to operate, which is so frustrating many times.
Thanks for sharing that. And just to give all of us a context, just if you could perhaps explain what you do within social services.
I can start.
No, that's for you. Sorry, because we were already doing the introductions when you joined in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's for me. Okay, yeah. So what I do currently, so as I said again, I started from mental health. I was doing counseling in mental health, and then from there I moved to child welfare. So doing investigation and assessing the needs of families. And now I'm the manager of equity with my agency. So trying to promote the equity and inclusivity and diversity in my own workplace, which on its own is another topic of discussion about how many of us who are now in these positions, and yet we know we don't literally, many of us hold the power to move the systems that wasn't made for us in the first place. And yet we are in these positions of equity, and equity leads somehow expected to do the magic work, and then you wake up the next day, there's no more racism within the organization because you've done the magic work. So that's what
Thank you. I'm going to be jumping into our second question, but before I do that, I just want to address some of the questions, or rather some of the insights that that everyone shared, and perhaps I can go back to Ellen, and this will lead into answering some of those the second part of the agenda, which is you mentioned how social services have become perpetrators or are perpetuating the problems within the system, and most people, or rather, not necessarily even independent people, but the way social services works and how interdependent it is. People are very comfortable with this kind of conversations, and so can be very blind to actually seeing something else because they're convinced that they're on the right path or are aware of it. And so in itself can be fairly damaging within social services. And I'd want to tie that into Jabari, you mentioned that in the system, there's a lack of leadership. And I'd want to touch on that as well, that when you look at social services, I am keen to understand why we do not consider social services in this spectrum of leadership. And so when we're considering social services, most institutions only see them as social services, but not necessarily in a spectrum of leadership and enforcing and driving that work. And Orville mentioned mentorship, sponsorship, and neutrality. And I'd want to touch on neutrality on the second aspect of this question is in what people deem as meritocracy, which I've mentioned in the past. People are inclined to think that culture is neutral, and really it's never neutral. Culture is normally largely defined by the dominant group within that setting, and it doesn't matter where you go in the world. It's the same thing with meritocracy. And so, as a matter of fact, you're never going to find something that's 100% neutral. I mean, would like to want to think that it's neutral, but it's not, and which leads us to a lot of other, compounding issues and that inflict a lot of wound and a lot of pain on the systems, where we all follow this meritocracy, and it's really not working. And finally, on progression, I think Mseni, you mentioned that. There's some work there to be done, especially when it comes to progression and actually moving the needle and trying to see some action on some of the initiatives that have been set forth. And so for the second question, I mean, based on your experiences, what are the top 3 barriers that are unique to Black professionals in social services? And I think a majority of you have mentioned some of them. And what are some of the solutions? And I'll take this back to Ellen.
That's a loaded question, first and foremost. But I know some of you have touched on the concept of being performative. And when I have these conversations with other people that may not necessarily be in this field, they always ask me, what does performative mean? And I actually had this conversation with the YMCA president, and I was like, oh, that's interesting that you don't know what that means yet. But I mean, then again, everything is kind of, based off of our own realities, right? So when I say performative, I mean, we're addressing the symptoms of the disease, right? So we'll look at indicators and say, oh, well, we know that 40% of youth in CAS are Black. So let's try to house them with Black families, but you're not really addressing the disease, right? We're just trying to deal with the symptoms so that people like us will hush down and say, okay, well, they're doing something about it, right? So that I think is really difficult as a Black professional in social services, because you recognize like, this doesn't really feel good. It doesn't feel good. Even though you're doing the work, it doesn't feel good. And the reason why I stress that whole idea of feeling is because I think people get so caught up in academia, they get so caught up in the technical sense of the work that we're doing, that they forget that this work is empathy based. And if you're not empathetic, then you cannot do the work. You may have all the degrees, you may have the PhDs, the masters, but if you don't have the empathy, there's no starting point in which I can relate to you or you can relate to me. So that lack of empathy it's very difficult for me. I think also one of the biggest things that I recognize is that there's this, especially in social services, because like we're supposed to know better, right? But this whole idea of this non-offensive culture, it becomes offensive. Like you're trying so hard not to offend me, but by doing so, you're minimizing your ability to learn from me, right? If you cannot say to me what you think outside of our conversations and the conversations that you have with your affinity biased group, so people that look like you, people that relate to you, then we're not going to get anywhere. I don't know what conversations you're having in your predominantly white household or your predominantly Southeast Asian household, you know what I mean? Have these very open conversations so we can get to the bottom of this. But that's another conversation for another day. And then also what I recognize as a Black professional in this field is that, and I'm sure we've all heard it as well, most of us here, that HR is not for you, it's for the organization that you're working for. And that's a problem. And I don't think people realize how big and deep of a problem that is, because HR's problem, or what they're supposed to be tasked with, is tackling these loaded conversations. So when we say things like, oh, why is so-and-so, I don't want to go to Ellen because she's so aggressive. Well, has Ellen demonstrated a behavior of aggressiveness? Or is it your own bias that perceives Ellen to be aggressive? And HR never asked that second question. They just go on and say, well, Ellen's never really been aggressive, or Ellen talks with her hands all the time, so she has to be aggressive, and they leave it at that. And then they go off of that. But we're not addressing the person who's making the accusation and addressing their own personal biases. And that's difficult as a Black professional, because if I know that the system, one, is not made for me, and my dad always used to go one step further. He said, listen, like, I have 3 sisters, he has 4 daughters. So he'd always be like, listen, girls, like the system was not made for you and mine, so don't expect it to work for you. So if I know this, and then that one entity that's supposed to help me, I'm also learning is not for me, where does that leave me? It leaves me on the periphery. And that's difficult because like I'm even trying to scale down when it comes to my language and the jargon. I'm trying to move away from language like marginalized, right? Like I'm pushed to the periphery. I'm not placed at the margins. You've pushed me there, right? So things like that, like it's I don't know, it's very difficult in the social services. I think too, for someone like myself, I've always been, I think as a Black woman, I think this goes back to that. And I just say, I am so happy to see like my brothers in this group, because in every social service group that I go to, it's all like white females. And if we have any other females, they're like Southeast Asian, or they're, you know what I mean? They're just not, I don't see no brothers. So I'm really happy to see all of you here, and I appreciate each and every one of you. But and going back to that, how do I say this without seeing this? There's that non-offensive behavior again, right? So I'm trying to check myself as well as that. But I think people don't recognize that, or people fail to understand that beliefs are what shape people's realities. So although I may think different or know different, what my beliefs that I hold are what I'm going to go by, right? And I think Jabari or Vil had mentioned, like, leaders they're agents of change, right? But what we don't have, and I think this is the problem when it comes to like, you know, combating specifically performative behavior, is that one, there's a resistance to it because there's no buy-in from employees. If we create all these wonderful policies and everyone's on board, people are supposed to be on board, if the employees themselves do not buy in to this narrative, it will never work. It will never work. It's just falsifying information. It's just narrative. It's just rhetoric, right? That no one is really buying into. And I think we have clear indicators of that with certain police forces, you know what I mean? Oh yeah, like we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. But if there's no accountability attached with this buy-in from your employees, it's just dead weight. It's just a lot of dead weight. I don't want to take up too much time, but then also I'm sure many of us have heard the whole idea of like intent versus impact. So although you may intend to do this, your impact is what really matters, right? So yeah, we want to help you guys and we're going to give you more funding, but if the impact is not felt throughout the community, then it's just a lack. And it honestly, this work sometimes, and so all of you that are doing mental health services, I appreciate you so much. I came into this as a young grasshopper and I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. And I was very quickly, I was like, I am not doing any clinical work. That cannot be me, just because it was a lot. It was a lot to, I think it becomes redundant, the labor that we're tasked with, right? I think that's what a lot of us are trying to say. And then also I came into this and people said very quickly, oh, Ellen's a firecracker. Oh, Ellen's very passionate. And they don't recognize that when it comes to a Black woman, those attributes are very demeaning. They're very degrading, right? Oh, you're so passionate. However, be careful. Ellen's in the room. She's a firecracker. What does that mean? So those conversations that make me feel like, okay, you know what? Let me just shut up. Essentially, like just shut up and play along. And that's where the thing came. But in terms of solutions, I'm here to learn the solution. So I'm open to anyone else's solutions.
Thanks for sharing that, Ellen. And I just wanted to say, and this is something that I've successfully used with clients, is that if someone ever tells you that they find you intimidating, a good way to respond is always tell them, I'm sorry that you find me intimidating, but I'm not. You're just intimidated. And it always seems to work. And that should never stop anyone from, or rather should move us away from this non-offensive culture where, you know, I'm not really responsible for the way you view me. That's your responsibility. And we need to start learning how to use language, or rather turn language in a way that works for us. And you're right. All these little snippets of firecracker or whatever the case is, they do have a difference. They make a difference, and in the way that you're able to convey or not even convey a message, right? And so we need to start paying attention to that. I'd want to hear your thoughts, Jabari.
And I have 3 kids running around behind me, so you might hear them. They're working their way this way, so the noise might show up at some point. But
that's okay.
My statement during Zoom time is, you're in my home now, so you're gonna have to deal. If you were visiting, you'd have to listen to them anyway. So I think I'll keep it tight because I like to listen and learn at the same time. So the response to the question that you had asked earlier about the leadership piece, and just reflecting on that and adding to it the top 3 barriers I've faced, I'm taking it very personally. And I've heard this from a few folks really recently, from some gentlemen who came to this at the city. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the few folks that, I shouldn't say few anymore, some of the folks that are really helping the corporation, like the City of Toronto Corporation, to lead things like the Black Staff Network, to lead things like our new Confronting Anti-Black Racism Committee, because there was not a formal body that responded into council within the City of Toronto up until about a month ago, whereas like the Indigenous Affairs Office has existed for quite a bit of time. So I think we're finally beginning to understand the systemic pieces that make differences, not just funding all day. It's really about structures that are there. So if I want something to happen within the corporation, there is now a standing committee you can go and speak to bring things directly to council. So it's things like that I think are really the big changers. If you look at some of the communities I've been in Canada for a long time. And when I say that around being a leader and my own barrier, number 1 was get out of my own head. That staying in my head was too much of a barrier. Thinking I could outthink problems and figure things out because I was witty and smart and all that kind of stuff was an actual barrier. And I needed to understand, number 1, that the reason why I lived in my head, hold on a sec. Okay, they've evolved. The reason why I live in my head is I'm scared of what's going on in my heart. So I evolved everything here because down here was just a really, really scary place to be. So another barrier was not spending enough time in my own heart and really understanding the reason why I'm passionate about this work is because I'm actually really sad all the time. Turn on the news, sad. Open the book, sad. Walk down the street, sad. See the cop cars, sad. To the point where I don't watch the news. Personally, I swear away from it. So if you were to ask me on a common day, oh, you heard about the newest young Black man that got killed? I actually don't know his name. I avoid those things because I know the living's names. I know many people might think that's kind of counterintuitive, but I know Black men that are fathers, social workers that need support. We don't know their names, but then we follow the tribe to go talk about our latest victims. I will say my prayers for those people, but I'm looking for the alive and how I could support them currently. But I needed to get out of my head and get into my heart to do that. And that was a major barrier for me. The last one is rest. I am done with the corporate culture of trying to work 100 hours a week because no one else is working, and really compartmentalizing my family commitments, understanding that I need to build in time for my kids, my wife, and myself, and be good about that. And doing things in my heart, getting away from the fear that I live within every day, and spending more time resting has actually made me more efficient at work. Putting in 14 hours a day, 15 hours a day, running down the guys in the streets, doing this, doing that. All it did was turning me into a bad person. And I was really starting to wear out myself. And it wasn't until I got to a point where I got to know the children of Laws, Roach, all the names that we're familiar with in Toronto. When you meet their children and they say, I never saw my dad. He was busy doing all that stuff. I'm like, I can't have my children not know who I am. Everyone in Toronto knows me, but my children. Like that can't be a thing. So not that I'm trying to compare myself to those greats, but really taking a step back and realizing that, the work can be done in the time I needed to, but the best thing I could do for the city is raise 3 champions, my children. And I've already then, to Ellen's first point, I've changed 3 lives by making sure that my kids are good, not counting all the others. So just that's my piece to add to the piece.
I like that. Thanks for sharing that. And that resonates with me, especially when it comes to moving away from the infinite hours in corporate space. And I'm done with that as well. And I no longer do that. It's my family comes first, my wife, my kids. That's my number one concern. And that's who I should be focused on, especially as it pertains to improving lives first. And then everything and everyone else becomes secondary. And I think that's the only way we start building our communities, first taking care of ourselves. And I think, especially within the corporate space, it can be very difficult to actually take care of yourself with all the demands and all the intersectionalities, especially that are faced by Black professionals. I'd want to hear your thoughts, Ovil.
Yeah, no, I think definitely. I mean, centering it around self-care and bringing it home is definitely always going to be key for, and should be always be key for all of us. So I think definitely agree with you, Jabari, on that, and echoing all the points. It was a really, really great discussion and some really good points. I'll go back to the point around meritocracy, and you brought up, Kevin, around why that's important, and I think that's a huge one in terms of discussing why that's important. So working hard, and when you say meritocracy, for me it means working hard means you're going to achieve success. So the issue with that is that it doesn't address the systemic racism because it only focuses on the achievement of work, and that's a huge piece. So bootstrapping your way up for it to obtain success is the reason why is an issue in the Black community, because if you're not seen doing bootstrapping your way up to success, then you're seen as being someone who's lazy. So here we are now having government that's very that values meritocracy, and automatically you're in a system where you're already losing. So the system's set up this way. So another example, I mean, you have communities where in the workplace where we're seeing where you're seeing your non-Black staff, and I'll say your white colleague is in a situation where they've done something that is completely wrong, and they have 9 strikes before they get out. You got a Black person who's doing the same thing. It's a 1 strike, you're out, you're written up, you're getting documented and out the door. And that's the fear that you have as the anxiety, and in addition to the microaggressions that you're seeing. So the playing field was never leveled from the beginning. So now you have two people who are governed very and policed very differently, to say the less. The other thing I'll jump into your top three. The question specifically around the barriers and why they're unique to Black professionals. What are the top three barriers? For me, I'd say coming in nonprofit, philanthropy, youth service, direct work, glass ceiling. The glass ceiling needs to be broken. A lot of middle management and not a lot of Black managers able to progress into past middle management. So that's still a thing. And the reality is there is that whole holistic fear that of Black people in high spaces, whether it's fear if the fear of the Black body, it's fear of the outspoken Black female, the outspoken Black male. There is a general fear of that in high spaces. Number two, I would say non-progressive human resource practices and policies. So a solution would be having policies that create a space for Black employees to succeed and grow, and having more inclusive, progressive plans. So really looking at our HR policies within nonprofit, social services, within municipal governments and federal governments and philanthropy, all those spaces I've navigated in some way, and the HR policies and practices are just not progressive. They don't promote inclusive, progressive plans. So it really goes back to that one strike, you're out policy. You have a non-Black person, 10 strikes, you're out policy. So you're governed differently. Policies are not developed in a way that produces progression for Black people and racialized people. The other piece would be, as a Black employee, and I think we all have to recognize when it's understanding when it's time for you to leave your employer. You really have to build that courage to have, no growth or no development. Then you have to have that courage to say, hey, I'm worth more than this. I can take my talent to South Beach and I can join the Lakers and I'll win the championship there. I mean, we have to have that courage to know that we have to build our own social capital to really realize that when it's time to bounce, we got to take our values and value that. So whether, for example, if there's no growth or development, misalignment with our values are not inclusive with, they're not valuing inclusivity within your employer. They're not, for me, that's a recognizing it's a time for me to leave, and they're undervaluing my skills. Then you know that you're in a space where you need to leave. Too many I've witnessed of our Black colleagues get caught up in the system where they feel like, well, if I leave, it could be, it's going to be anti. It's almost like your employer uses racism as a reason to keep you there, because you're afraid that there's going to be even worse racism where you go next. But you have to realize that you're worth something. You have value. You have social capital, and your value is something that employers need to value and embed within policies. So we're fighting against a system, yes, that wasn't built for us, but we also have to fight back and say, you know what? You're using me right now. I'm out straight. And we have to be able to say that and walk out consciously, knowing that, we can take and be confident in doing that, and regardless of and be able to, there's going to be racism everywhere you go, but be able to equip yourself with the skin to say that you know your value. The next thing, and I mean, obviously this is no right or wrong book to any of all these things. These are all come in a certain situation. There's not packaged in any way. Ellen, you mentioned the topic of language, and you touched on marginalized and how that's an issue. And I really resonated with me as a person who's valuing language. I have a linguistics major at U of T. That was my major. So definitely thinking around how language plays a huge role and why that's important. So marginalized, at risk, underserved, all need to get wiped out. Like, we're not underserved, we're not marginalized, let's know who we are. we are worth much more than society places on us. Society has been constructed to embrace whiteness. However, we have to recognize our own histories and our own values that provide value, and understand the value that we bring as Black humans, and the wealth and our history and how we've contributed to building all these countries, and our histories, and why we've been called and marginalized or underserved or BIPOC, and put into the same acronyms as everyone now, when our experiences are different. We shouldn't be called underserved, we shouldn't be called marginalized. We have been historically extracted. We have been extracted from all of the history books, the curriculums, the education pieces, our employees. So rather than saying that we're marginalized, we're not. We're fighting against a system that has extracted our knowledge from it. And in order to do that, they either have to, unfortunately, as Cornel West said, the system cannot reform itself. Unfortunately, it can't reform itself on its own. So now you have to just keep fighting, and you're going to get some gains. Yes, and we're in a system where I look at it as a paradigm shift. So we're fighting a certain fight now. So, our kids, my 3 kids, aren't going to have to fight that same battle later on. And that's the fight we got to keep fighting, because it's always going to be an ongoing fight unless they tear down the whole system, burn it down, and throw it out the door. This is just not gonna. This is the reality. Is we got to keep pushing, fighting, and not giving up. The whole piece around. There's also that concept of. And maybe you've heard of it, whitesplaining, and what that means. The whitesplaining, and what does that sound like? So it's the topic of condescending, viewing topics related to people of color or Black people in a condescending manner, especially regarding race or injustice issues. So there's always that level of fragility, but it's like, oh no, he didn't experience that much. That ain't racism. He was just trying to give you some honest feedback. And we actually have to really challenge those situations and really speak our truths and call it out for what it is. If we don't name it, then how can we fix it? So these are situations where we got to really look at what the issues are, rather than look at having these countless conversations where we're discounting what our own Black colleagues have experienced, but we need to value that and put that at the table and really challenge these systems. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks for sharing that. And you bring up some really good points, especially when it comes to language and how we choose to use our language in ensuring that people on the other side can recognize how harmful it is in perpetuating itself when we use words, just like you mentioned, marginalized or whatever the case is. And maybe perhaps even start considering, maybe we should consider using, historically suppressed people. Maybe that ought to bring to the attention of the other person that, we're not necessarily marginalized, we've been oppressed, or we've been suppressed, or we've been, whatever the case is, to a point where they can really understand that, this is their doing, not our doing, right? But in the interest of time, then let me hear what Senwa's thoughts are on this.
Thank you. And I really like the fact you spoke about language, because it seems like language is so powerful, because oftentimes they use language to discriminate, and they use language to oppress, and they use language for anything for us. And sometimes we have said ourselves as people, we have internalized that and really just picked on the language that really used against us for so long to believe that that's the fact about who we are. So we really have to start fighting the language they are using against us to use against us, so we can really use the language for our own benefit ourselves. I guess for me, I would focus more on the solution part of it, because a lot have been shared about the barriers. And I think for me, some of my challenges have been, I agree with all of what you've shared about leadership and many other issues. And to that, I think, for me, I feel like it's high time for us as a people to start building our own resilience that's not defined by the Western way or Western view of how resilience is supposed to be. Because oftentimes there's a view of resilience that's Western, which is more like it's on you to do everything you have to do so you can be resilient. But when you look at the concept of resilience in most of the African way of looking at resilience, it's cultural, it's communal. You cannot be resilient if you don't have the support you need around you that makes you resilient. So it's dependent on the context in which you are in, so that you can be resilient enough to be able to fight whatever that comes your way. And what they did well in terms of colonization is that they came and divided us and they conquered. So that same principle applies in our own positions. We could find, I find myself, I only have a few Black members within our organization, but many of us are so divided that we can't even come together to agree on anything, because we have been so colonized in our thinking that we can't actually see ourselves as a unit to be able to stand firm and united to be able to fight the system alongside each other. And to me, that's one of the challenges I see, like, it's so huge, and that's really kept many of us in social services behind, because if we could work together, we can actually fight the system. Maybe some of us could find ourselves in a position where we can actually influence, we can be in power. But because we don't really come together, we tend to fight each other, because that's what they did very well with us in terms of colonization. And we tend to portray the same behavior almost everywhere we go. It becomes a challenge for us to actually be in those positions where we can influence, or we can have power in our own organization. So for me, I think it's us to start retelling ourselves, like, we can define ourselves in the ways they have defined us. We need to start joining forces together, coming together and build our own resilience. And through that, I think we can be able to challenge the system in a much better way. And it's not a one day work. So it has to be done progressively, and knowing that the system wasn't meant for us, but we can actually work in the system and fight the system in a strategic way. Because if we do align ourselves, because we see this in many parts of the world, in Africa, when all these times when people started fighting for colonialism and independence, people fought them so strongly, and they were able to win because they joined the forces together. And I think if we do start that, we can also be able to find ourselves in a position where we can hold power. Because in my experience, not being able to sit in leadership position is one of the challenges that we do have in social services about the issues we face today. Because most of our people, the decisions they make there, they made them for us, and then they affect our people. We are now told, oh, just go out and implement the policies they have put in place. But none of our people was even there implementing those policies. Nobody was there present. They didn't even have our way of thinking about our people. They didn't even think about, okay, how is this really going to impact the Black youth, the Black family that we're going to be serving tomorrow? They didn't have that in mind. They didn't even care. They didn't have to think about it. It's not their people. But I think it's for us to be thinking, if they are really going to be having policies about us, we should be at the table making and influencing those policies for ourselves, because they will impact us. And if we don't push for that agenda for representation, because most white people obviously who think they are not racist, especially in the social services, everybody thinks is a saint. It's like it's somebody else's problem somewhere. But as social workers, we can't be racist at all. But we all know that's not true. All of us somehow are predisposed to that, and unconscious biasness is what we see every day in our line of work. But nobody admits that, and that's really impacts the number of families that we serve and we work with. And I think that needs to be addressed. And the way to do that is the concept of communal resilience. If we can all build our own resilience as a community, joining forces together, we can start fighting the system as a whole instead of trying to do this alone.
Thanks for sharing that. You bring up some really good points, especially as it pertains to community building and how we can enhance through our collective experience in changing the landscape. I just want to be conscious of time here. So I'll jump into the next question on our agenda, which is simply, what are your thoughts on the roles the following institutions should play in addressing barriers faced by Black professionals in social services? And the three institutions would be educational, the nonprofit sector, and government as well. Just your thoughts, maybe a quick highlight. I'll take this back to Ellen. I just want to keep an eye on the time as well. So maybe your top two, and we'll take it around. Thanks.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on roles? Okay, so I guess for all three of the things that you pointed out, I would say the concept of, and we all fall victim to it, credentialism is something that is based off of white supremacy, right? It's just like you said, the gatekeepers. How can we continue to make those gates bigger, higher, more stronger, fortify them to keep people like us out? And no matter how much we strive, so no matter how much education we get, no matter how much money we make, no matter how many, whatever the case may be in terms of social status, we'll never get to what they want, right? We're always gonna be Black. Even if you bleach your skin, you still got Black features. So there are those things, credentialism, that really does bother me. And really, 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 really quickly, I'm sure we're aware of the school to prison pipeline. Like, I'm tired of seeing it. Working at a correctional facility, it was disgusting. Starting at the age of 7, Malcolm was considered having ADHD, or Malcolm was considered being, problematic. And it was like, okay, well, what are the other extenuating circumstances here, right? And it really boils down to deficit thinking, right? Oh, well, you see a bunch of Black boys, oh my goodness, what are they going to be up to? Oh my goodness, they're trouble. Oh my goodness, that sort of thinking. So what roles they should play in addressing barriers faced by Black professionals in social services? I don't know. I really I try to be hopeful, and I am hopeful. That's in what I do this work. But I think Oprah said it best. The only way to get rid of this is if we killed off generations of people. You know what I mean? It's really morbid sounding, but this has all been ingrained in us, right? Even our parents, just shut up and do the job, just shut up and go to school, just do this and you'll be fine. We're not fine. I can't even go to the store without someone thinking I'm robbing them, right? So those sort of things. I really don't know what roles institutions should play in addressing barriers, because I think those institutions are the problem. I can't really ask the problem to give me the solution. Right? The problem is in not-for-profit, it's in government, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
That's interesting. So I'd want to think that, or rather, I do find that I think we as a society have an obsession of not necessarily looking at the root cause of the problem. We do a lot of surface thinking, and we look at everything at face value. So if you see a young person that's in trouble somewhere, we're more focused on understanding exactly what actually got them there, as opposed to what's actually causing it. And I think a lot of institutions are built as such, is that we're here to address the problem here and now, or rather, we've been funded to address your problem. And the only way we're going to keep funding social services is by making sure that we can fund the surface problem. And if you're not funding the surface problem, then it means you're doing nothing. And I think a lot of institutions function as such. And so how do we move the mentality from avoiding the surface thinking to let's address, because I would want to think that social services should be addressing the root cause of the problem. I mean, if there's high incarceration rates in a certain group, then let's get down to the problem. Let's not necessarily try and move them out of incarceration or address the issue as it is. Let's try and find out why it's happening. But I do find that in this society, or rather, we want to think of meritocracy again, is that people are so inclined to look at the either or. Okay, this is happening right now. This needs to be addressed right now. We're gonna provide you funding for this right now. I mean, I'd want to hear your thoughts on that.
Mine thoughts? Okay. So really, once again, I don't mean to sound like Debbie Downer, but there's no money in the solution for the gatekeepers. There's just no money in it. The more people that are incarcerated, private companies make money. The more issues, like you said, addressing the surface level issues, that means more funding, more program. We can justify getting more programming, more funding. So there's no money in it for them. When I talk to people, I talk about sacrifice. People always say, well, what can we do? No, the question is, what are you willing to do? Because it always involves some level of sacrifice. And the concept of sacrifice for a lot of people doesn't sit well with them, because for them, sacrificing means, getting your desired goal by sacrificing or letting go of something else. But what, for example, community policing, what does it cost the police to really service the community in a respectable, friendly manner, right? Not much, but we can see that studies have shown us that with community policing, there's a higher effect than there is in the way they're doing it now, right? So the idea of sacrifice means somebody is getting let go. I recently had a conversation with the OPS the other day, and they said to me, well, the government doesn't want to hire too many people. We want to keep it small. That's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you to hire everybody and everything, but a lot of who you have sitting at the table right now are the problem. And you know this. And if you're not willing to bring in fresh blood, because everyone knows, even parents have said to me, oh, get a job with the government and you're good for life. People go into this knowing that there's no repercussions, there's no retribution for how they or how they act or how they treat people, right? And then at the end of the day, it's very realistic to me that, when we have things like burnout, compassion burnout is real. Empathy burnout is real. Some people just stop caring. They just stop caring. They haven't been serviced themselves. They haven't been supported themselves. So in terms of the solution, I really don't think people are ready for that conversation, because people are not ready to sacrifice themselves. Companies want to say, oh, well, how do I help? Are you willing to let go of 1/3 of your pay? Probably not. Until we're ready to have that conversation, we can't really have this conversation. So that's my opinion on that.
That's interesting, and thanks for sharing your thoughts. You got me thinking now. You got me into a lot of thinking. That's great. And I do like listening to a whole lot of this. Jabari, your thoughts?
Just vibing off of Ellen, to be honest. I was making a decision in my head. Do I go with the current track of the conversation, or do I say what I actually again, going back to my heart? I would say number one, so I decided to go with my heart, not live in the barrier. We have to be optimistic. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which is 10 minutes ago for a lot of us, our parents looked into the government and there was no employees of color there, zero. They would see one other Black person on the street and be like, what's going on? Because that might be the only Black person you see for the next week or so. So a lot of us are caught in the conversation of the 60s that there's, with new language, of course, that things are terrible, things aren't changing, but it's evolving. And I'm going to be one of those people that believes that change is happening. And I'm going to live optimistically. And I think governments, if I'm going to speak governments, and I would hope nonprofits would do the same, but I think there's just too much room for nepotism in a nonprofit world. Like, it's just too small, so I can hire my friend and my buddy and there's no one really watching. I think the number one thing we could do that governments could do is to try to do exactly what Alan just said, is open the doors for more people who are willing, motivated, and know what's going on in the streets. Because as an example, my kids went to a Christian private school. They still do, but we switched schools. And I remember the teachers asking me things about that the kids were saying. At that time, I'm trying to remember the word, but there was a word that the grade 3s were saying. Grade 3s, like children were saying. And the teachers, I went to one of the parent teacher trips, and first of all, having a Black father there was like, oh my God, your group, sir, is going to be all these guys that we've never been able to keep under reins. Mr. Lindsay, this is your group, and they were cool for the day. And they wondered, like, why were they all cool? I'm like, because they know what's up. I'm not fooling around with that. But the teachers took a moment to ask me, what does this mean? They say this word. They say this word. What does that mean? What does that mean? And I took it in stride. I didn't do what I hear a lot of my colleagues say, you should know, you're white, you're the perpetrator, you know what to do what you need to do. I'm like, no. Come and sit with me. I will teach you how to do it, because the investment is you will run into one of my children one day, and I'm paying into you what you're going to pay into my children or their friends in the future. A lot of people will not like that approach. I'm just going to put that on the table. But for me, second thing, Kevin, understanding that we are all living in a very privileged world. There are other countries that this conversation would be lovely for them to have. They're in the middle of famine, disease, civil war, trying to figure things out. And we're here privileged wondering, how do we have this great conversation here? And No, we're good. At all things, we're good. We're all in our homes on Zoom, having a nice conversation. We're okay. So I think that for me, the optimism is, I get up tomorrow morning, I do what I can, I do it boldly. I invite anyone else who wants to do it boldly the way they can to sit next to me and do it. And we do that. And I think that is the main piece. And I would finally say, and which is something I challenge all of my colleagues, Black, white, or other, is to get to know the others. Many of the Black folks I talk to do not have white friends, family, colleagues, but they claim to know what white people know. And they haven't talked to a white person on a level in years. They only know white people through the treatment the system has given these folks to do. Vice versa, white colleagues, same challenge. They have no idea who Jabari is and what I live and how I do and what I deal with. So there's a level of humanistic piece that we need to get to in this conversation. So I challenge all of my city colleagues, when we were able to, get out of the office and go to a community organization AGM. Go sit down in the middle of that and listen. Lot to learn. So I think it's really about get out of your seat and go learn what's going on in the community. Go on a WebEx now and go find out what's going on in the community, and hopefully that'll help your practice a little bit. But I think overall, a healthy dose of optimism, I think, will help all of us in this work. So that's my contribution.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. And at least my approach has always been that everyone has a voice in this. So and it's always best when you combine all these approaches. They all provide that needle. They actually move the needle. A combination of my efforts, Ellen's efforts, Orville's efforts, Jabari's efforts, Msendo's efforts, and everyone else out there that's doing this, all contribute to some level of change. And I must agree that it is very important to be realistic and be optimistic, and at least approach every single situation simply based on the context. And I don't think there's really one way of doing this. There's various ways, and I think the comfort zone that everyone has within their approach serves a purpose as well.
Kevin, can I
Well-
throw one thing in though? One thing you said that I just want to make sure we're being reflected off of what we said. So I just want to return something. Not everyone has a voice. That is definitely not what I was saying. There are people that are voiceless, that it's our job to be their voice or to amplify what they're saying. So I'm not saying that everyone's saying of having a voice. What I'm saying is, if I were to take that comment and apply my optimistic lens, is that we can give people, or people can get their voice heard. BLM is a good example of that. They didn't ask for a platform, they created one. People would say, oh, they didn't have a voice. Yeah, they created a voice and they made things happen from their seat and their space. What I'm saying from my particular seat, optimism is my way of looking at the world. So if I look at a kid or a system or a structure and I don't think to myself, this is the final say on this work. I think there's a better way to do it, and we could achieve that. That's what I mean about optimism. But I do definitely know that in the work that we're doing, specifically in marginalized people, female, whether identified or misgendered, young people, there's plenty of people that don't have a voice in this work, in this world, and governments need to listen, systems need to listen, and we're not doing a very good job at doing that. So I just want to make sure I added to that piece. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Thanks, and I appreciate you clarifying and getting out there. But well received and well understood, and it certainly resonates with me as well in terms of how we need to move the needle. Orville, your thoughts?
Definitely a lot of important feedback. So I think just adding on to what Jabari said, I think for me, what makes me hopeful is just the fact that we're just having more meaningful conversations, and we're pushing for that discussion. We're pushing for a meaningful discussion and change. So there's a lot of negative that we know is happening, and I can start by the fact that there actually are some conversations that are happening that are more uplifting than watching the CP24 news. So I'll start with that, but I also want to acknowledge that starting from the place that racism is a man-made social construct, and we were all born innocent. This was passed on to us. So we have to recognize that everyone has to do that inside job, whether that means coming out of your circle, as Jabari mentioned, not just speaking to your own Black colleagues, but speaking to everyone within your communities, challenging yourself to be in spaces that are going to be brave and take you into conversations that will actually help you to grow. So we inherited this system that, you know, is built to advantage some and disadvantage others. And I think within the workplace and social services, we need more leaders that are going to create and understand staff's values and build upon Black people's values. So I'll start with that, but then I'll jump into some of my thoughts around the role in terms of institutions playing addressing Black professionals in social services. So I definitely want to I resonate a lot with the feedback that Ellen mentioned, and I think definitely what you're seeing is the reality of a system that was built to fail us. When we look at it in that way, I think we have to really look at, you know, what can we really do that will actually benefit us in a system that's actually that was built to put us down in the first place. One of the things I mentioned before, I said I looked at it as a paradigm shift. Like we're in this as it's a constant fight because I'm doing this now so that my daughters don't have to do that later on. And when I look at that in that way, and not to say anyone's approach is right or wrong. I think the system, and I totally agree, the system is meant to damage and destruct, and that's why we have to create our own platforms like Parents of Black Children or Black Lives Matters, and we need to create those spaces. Within the education system, representation within the curriculum, within staff and teachers, that's more needed. Training around anti-Black racism, well, not just leaving it at training, but looking at how are we going to see the research, but actually action the research and action the thoughts. Learnings, getting the learnings, but actually putting them into action is another thing. So having, you know, a CABR unit, having a really good equity DEI workshop is great. You learn a lot, but then back to the next step is hire the Black person to be the DEI worker and put them in the corner while your senior leadership team and your board team are all white. So we need to challenge that as well. And we have to say, we can't be taking only the DEI positions. We have to be looking at how we're going to push forward to take positions of senior leadership, being on boards, where we're not going to be doing that work exceptionally, where they can compartmentalize us in a certain department. We actually have to be in spaces where we're actually going to be making decisions. So we have to be in those spaces where we're decolonizing against anti-Black racism and challenging these systemic issues within our boards and within our senior leadership teams. My thing is, if we're not at the table, then we end up being on the menu with other people making decisions for us. So we have to really be at these tables to really address these issues. So then we look at nonprofits. So racially reflective leadership, again, senior leadership teams on our boards, more higher levels, and within represent in comparison to the organization's target population. So we're looking at organizations now that are serving Black youth in Black communities with an all not diverse board. This is a critical issue that we're seeing over and over again, and we have to look at we have to be brave enough to challenge it, call it out. We also have to be brave enough to be able to say we're going to be in those positions, and we got to feel comfortable knowing that we're not feeling we can't watch what people say about us and what people think of us within our own communities, because as you mentioned, Misanwa, is that your name? We have to really look at being comfortable with being uncomfortable, but unfortunately we have to look at how we're going to undo these practices of colonization that was put up on us. And then you mentioned some really key points, so joining forces together, but also challenging these systems and being able to support your Black colleague or friend who's the only Black person in that organization, and being able to be that sounding board, that mentor, that person that's going to listen to them, say I believe in them, and encourage them to still focus and be grounded in that all white space where they're at. So, and that's the sad reality that we're living in. Next thing I would talk about is the government in terms of action. So less reports on issues and more tangible action. Again, we've seen over and over more recommendations, reports, collecting dust, mandating racial representation within senior leadership teams, within boards, more focus on funding Black-led organizations. In a perfect world, these are all things I'd want to definitely, that should be the norm. However, as we all know, the system is not it wasn't constructed in a way where we're coming out of this corporate plantation and being into a place where we're actually adapting to our own views and doing things that are building our own social capital. So we have to really go back into history and value the findings of Marcus Garvey, self-governance, doing things at our own will, not relying on government to respond to these issues, and really looking at how we're going to address these problems as a whole, as a community, and really come back to that whole mantra of Black power, Black unity, and Blackness, and centering that within ourselves. I think that's a huge piece. The other thing I would say is that, you know, we've experienced a lot of loss during COVID, and you've seen how the pandemic has exacerbated some of the realities and experiences of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people. Specifically in this conversation, I'm gonna be ultra Black, like the new Nas now album. We're talking ultra Black. So I'm gonna be really looking at how we're going to benefit Black people, Black organizations, Black businesses. What we're seeing is that there's been, you know, a shift in organizations, businesses having more Black employees, Black staff in senior leadership, and recognizing that there is value in doing that. So that's one of the things that I'm seeing that are slightly making me hopeful, despite, you know, the next day I see the clip with the officer who accidentally shot the young Black man and should have been tasered. So these are the daily realities and the things that bring tears to my eyes and all of our community eyes. And we are a resilient community because we experience so much pain, but yet we rise and we are forgiving, and we have to value that. We have to value ourselves and our own self-care, knowing that we are resilient, but we can't be taken advantage of. So know your worth, despite how much you are getting paid in your certain jobs, whether it's federal, municipal, or even you're a senior leadership. If you're not being treated right, know when it's time to leave. Know your worth. Know that you bring value. Create circumstances that will allow you to be connected to your organization and to create your own self-currency and your own self-governance. So people now I've seen are becoming much more picky in terms of the places that they want to work. So they're valuing self-care, balance, and more values alignment. So people need to really and that's one of the things that are, I think, these conversations that are bringing it to light and making me more hopeful, is that we're pushing for that direction of more meaningful discussion around self-care, balance, and employment, and celebrating Black fathers, Black parents, Black mothers, and the contributions we bring as a community. So we have to look at how we're going to invest in each other's success and really less compartmentalize the try and also, you know, address the ongoing trauma that has been put on us over years through our own resilience and being able to really have those brave spaces where we can talk about this as a community and in this space. So thank you, Kevin, man. This was great. I think it was healing for many of us, but we also have to really support each other after this.
Thanks for sharing that. And you brought up so many good points, and one that, you know, allows us to reflect on some of the things that we're actually currently going through in the current moment, and I think is telling of where we should be going. And I'm with you when it comes to especially building our own networks, building our social worth, and moving away from, or having this paradigm shift. We're moving away from the reliance on those systems that have been created not to benefit us but others, and learning and recognizing that it's time that we build our own and benefit from it, and use our experiences in building systems that work for us and sustain us. And when it comes to, like, especially the work that I do, one of the key things that we spend on a significant amount of time in, especially when it comes to consulting with the organization, is leadership. And in building systems that are equitable, nothing changes if there's no change in leadership. And so we spend a good chunk of the time working with leadership, and we consider ourselves as as the agents that are there to cultivate, and they have to nurture it, they have to water it, and they have to execute it. And so if it's not coming from leadership, then it's going nowhere. And so, well, it can be easier to work with the front line at any organization because they really understand what's going on. It's a different ballgame when it goes to when you go to leadership, and it's a different language, totally different language. And I think that's where we should be focusing our efforts is leadership and ensuring that they understand what we're talking about when it comes to equitable practices and recognizing differences and understanding how the system is not built to benefit everyone equally. And so that is a very difficult task when it comes to leadership. And I think we all need to start recognizing that, especially within the organizations. Seno, I'd want to hear your thoughts. I know we are simply out of time, and I'd want to cover the last two questions quickly. So maybe for the last two questions, maybe spare about maybe a minute or two to give us your thoughts. But Seno, if you don't mind giving us your thoughts on the third question, which is simply your thoughts and the roles that the institutions should play in addressing barriers faced by Black professionals in social services, and simply educational institutions, nonprofits, or government.
Yeah, I guess quickly to answer that is like as much as it's hard to be optimistic, but I also believe, I think it's the way to move forward in my view. And the reason I'm saying this is that the fact we are having this open discussion and more people, I believe, listening, and maybe more awareness is being created, and possibly some sort of desires is coming from this. More people are seeing the desire, or maybe being more aware and desire to change and to see why we need to become more equitable in our own spaces and in our own personal lives. And I think because when it comes to racism and all this equity work, it's personal. If we can't really get somebody to change, it's so hard to get institutions. If we have the people working in those spaces do their own personal journeys, then they can influence the change with their own systems. And because of that, I guess personally, I tend to think maybe we will get there one day. An educational system, for example, has to change because they have a role to play. The materials they give many of us influence the way we think about racism, the way we think about the other, we think about the whole structure of the system. And then the policies the government put in place influence the work we do. For example, for me in the child welfare, the government somehow sends us this document and policy that really dictates what we can do. And when you look at the mandate of child welfare, we have this eligibility spectrum, which actually decides when we open our file and when we can't open our file, and what we do with our file, and what we do with somebody's life. So even though specific agencies can change, if we don't have that change from the ministry that really affects or dictates what we do on the ground, it's so hard to believe that change can actually happen. So therefore, I think they really do have a huge role to play to remove some of these barriers, because they develop the policies that daily affect or impact the work we do on the ground. And hopefully, with everything happening in our world today and more people, hopefully, I hope so. I'm hoping so. Even though sometimes it's hard when I sleep and I see what's happening in my world, it's like, are we really getting anywhere? But I also see we are getting somewhere, because I'm having discussions with people that I didn't think I would have. And some of them are being more open and genuine, I think. And because of that, I tend to believe we are heading somewhere.
Thanks for sharing that. And when I mention institutions, I'd want us to think of institutions as not necessarily a third party. I'd want us to start thinking of institutions as something that we can become part of, because we're not part of it. And that is a problem in its own. And if we really want to influence change, then I think it's important that we start paying some, recognizing our civil duty to participate in political systems that, however, may not be tailored for us, but in a window that's where people seem to be listening, and I'm saying seem to be listening, because I'm cautiously optimistic. And I think it's very important that we can seize on that moment to be in those positions of influence, like government institutions and so forth. Because if we were on the table to begin with, we would not be having this conversation, because we would have had systems that would be tailored for us. But we were never there to begin with, and we've never been part of that conversation. In the interest of time, I'm just going to jump into our last question. I mean, what role do you think social services plays in breaking barriers to both industry and community? And I'll take this back to Ellen, and we'll maybe give it a few minutes, maybe a few minutes for each and every one of us to share their thoughts on what role they think social services plays.
Like I mentioned before, social services, because the government, because these other networks have created to be so, are responsible for politicizing Black bodies, right? We need to see more Black males in the prison system. We need to see more Black students outside of the education system to fund them into the prison system, so forth and so on. What role does social services have? I think social services is a runoff of these other institutions, right? They kind of do the dirty work, more or less, or the cleanup, I should say, of these other institutions. It's supposed to rectify the wrongs that have been made. And how they can help the community. I don't know. I don't want to be the negative Nancy of the group, but I feel like I'm becoming that, to be honest.
No, you're not. Sorry to interrupt. You're not being, just provide your thoughts as you see them. Because when I mention social services, I'm not necessarily referring to social services as they exist today. Perhaps what you would envision social services would provide to creating systems that work for us. Forget about social services as they were created, but think about social services in a way that would facilitate something that works for us.
Okay, so how I do my work is I don't assume that we are the experts in other people's lives. I think that's the biggest thing. I think social services tells you, okay, you have this training, now go and teach them how to live their lives. And that's not fair. I think people are autonomous beings. They have autonomous experiences, and therefore they are the experts in their life, rightfully so. I think the role that social services has is how can we support you, right? And providing assistance to wherever areas of your life that may be. Ideally, what I would love to see is the ability to empower. So I know Jabari said that he worked in Malton, and I used to love working in Malton. I used to work at M&S, not work at M&S, but I used to work with M&S in the role that I was doing. And I love that boots to ground work. I love walking around the Darsal and be like, yo, what's up? And talking to the youth and saying, okay, what do you need? What's going on? And I think that's really the epitome of social services. What do you need? How can I help you? How can I bridge this gap for you? There is a gap here, but how can I bridge that for you, right? And if that involves you physically becoming that bridge, then that's what you do, right? Not something people need to walk all over you, but you need to be able to hand off one person to another person or to the services that they may need. And I think that's the biggest thing for what I would like to see. I think oftentimes we misattribute discrimination to the few bad apples. And we need to recognize it's not the few bad apples, it's a system, right? We know it's a system, but it's not the few bad apples. So how do we make the system accountable for those few bad apples? Because essentially we've licensed or we've fostered or we've nurtured this sort of workplace. I mean, I grew up with the idea, I'm Ghanaian, and I grew up in Jane and Wilson, and my parents used to always say, when we came, first of all, they didn't think racism was a real thing. And I think people need to understand that just because they're Black, not all Black people believe that anti-Black racism is a real thing, first and foremost. They don't think it happens here. They think a lot of times it's our own fault and we need to pull up our bootstraps and we can do it ourselves. So that's a huge thing, number one. So I think social services needs to somehow rectify that, that message. But we used to always say, not all skin folk are your kinfolk. And I think when as someone who is a recipient of social services, when I would go into a social organization and see a Black person, I'd be like, that's not for me. They're not for me because they're working with my oppressor. right? And I know that myself and people that were in my circle at 415 Driftwood, we felt that way. We felt that way, right? Don't trust this. They work with the police. Don't trust them. So we always talk about this community building, this trust building. I don't know how that would work. I think we need to see like-minded or people that look like us. I think children cannot see or cannot do what they do not see. That's huge. They need to see people like us. And I think we have to get away with like credentialism. I think that's a huge one. I think we're just creating more doors for people. So I did it, but I have a master's. Oh, I did it. That's not realistic for people, right? So in terms of and how we can bridge that gap, that would be a collective idea or whatnot. But yeah, I think people are not aware of how skeptical people are of social services. People really don't trust us. And rightfully so, because we come and we don't stay for a long while. We come for a good time and then we leave. And I think that needs to change. So, yeah.
That's very interesting, and thanks for sharing that. Very interesting perspectives there. Almost you made me reflect on some of the things that I was actually considering, and very, very interesting thoughts. Thanks for sharing that. Jabari, I want to hear your thoughts.
This is what role does social services play in breaking barriers? That is the question we're discussing, right? Everything Ellen said. I think the way to get people to stay in community and get them to stay to do the work that they're supposed to do is one of the big roles I think government or social services or systems, as you kind of clarified social service to mean, is data. How much of who is where. When we certain divisions of the city didn't consider the lack of Black leadership a thing until we ran the data that said there's 0% Indigenous leaders, there's 2% Indigenous, Black leaders. It's like in senior leadership. And when those ratings were delivered to general managers, suddenly there was a push to start hiring Black and Indigenous people in non-union positions. So it's an unfortunate argument, and I've heard many of my American counterparts in social services say they're always amazed at Canadian systems, because in the States, you just say, this is what we need. And you either find a private funder or you go to the government and you get some money to do it. And no one's questioning your theory of change. But here, 6 or 7 years ago, when U of T was pushing through the Center of Criminology, the Black, brown stop rates by the police, it wasn't until those data came out that people started to believe the story that kind of stop and frisk stuff was happening in Toronto. Everyone knew it up until that point, colloquially or anecdotally, but until data showed up, and again, I know it's a prong of white supremacy for us to believe these kind of academic resources. But until the system is shifted, the government has a responsibility to take all this data that we're collecting, because there are mounds of data being collected by the government in every ministry, and say, what can we do better? And as a tangible example, that has nothing to do with social services, I heard a presentation very recently about colleagues in transportation who are reviewing the quality of roads across Toronto. And surprise, surprise, the neighborhoods where there are high rates of racialized people, the road quality is poor. Like, it's going down to that level. So if there was a chink in my optimism day, that would have been the day. Like, God, even road quality? Like, give me a break. Like, I'm accustomed to the rhetoric of shootings and those kind of things, but even down to the roads. But what is the actual cause is the people there, again, to Alan's point, they don't call 311 to complain about the pothole outside of 451 Driftwood or 605 Rogers Road. They just hop over it. No, that's part of the deal. It's whatever. But let that pothole happen in one of the portions of Toronto where they know if I make a call, something happens. So the role that we play is learning to trust when people say things, that we do something to it. So people will say, oh, they actually did something, and trust that happens. But where is COVID the highest? Where is the road processes the worst? Where are the EMS response times the worst? Like, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So the more you can show with data that there is a discrepancy in the level of customer service, people will respond. But if you are not saying 2% differences in the roads in a particular part of the city and just saying, please fix our roads, it doesn't hold the same weight. So I'm adding to my colleague's comment that yes, there is mistrust. And part of the mistrust is that governments don't believe what people are saying. So governments have a role and a responsibility to say, okay, let's look at the data that we're collecting that will verify these people's voices, even though we shouldn't have to do that. Let's get the data. Data is delivered. All right, now we have voices and data, which should equal action. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks for sharing that. You can't argue with data. I'm a big believer in accountability, and there's no other. The best way of moving any needle or getting any action or traction on anything is data, and that's very hard for anyone to argue with. Orville, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just continue the flow of the conversation. I think data definitely is important. We actually have to use the data and action it. So the problem is that we get data, and we have data, but we also have to fight for disaggregate data, population-based data, and we had to break it down even further. So we got to look at, okay, well, we're not just BIPOC. There's Black, there's racialized, there's South Asian, there's Asian. When you break it down by population and see the oppression, even going further, and you see it's still disparities, the vast disparities between non-Black and Black when you go into population-based, race-based data, and delve into that. So I think we need to value data. Totally agree with Jabari and Ellen on that. We have to push for actioning it and moving it to the table and actually getting things to happen. So totally agree with that. And on the point of the Ellen, you had mentioned around the concept of not even supporting or addressing as a youngster, or when you're growing up in the Jane and Finch area and seeing the Black person in the social services office and what that meant to you. And I first of all, I want to, acknowledge that is true, and I definitely, I empathize with that, and that is a reality of many people. The one thing we don't talk about is that issue of what I call plight racism. And plight racism is bad because internalized colonialism is another area of what it is. So you mentioned that, not being of my kin, not being of my skin, but not of my kin, but there's some of us that look like us that harbor internalized colonialism. So even though there are opportunities for white people to explore and be aware of their white privilege, there is that less awareness of the fact that, there is less consciousness around the fact that people of color demonstrate racism to others of color, and Black people demonstrate it to others. So therefore, our power structures, as Ms. Senwa has mentioned, are not challenged in a critical way. So in essence, what happens is that Black people of color have been co-opted into maintaining some of the same tenets of colonialism. And then we get into that whole concept of what I call like internalized colonialism and concepts that have been addressed through some of our own elders, Dr. Akua Benjamin, who coined the term anti-Black racism, and realizing that was a term that was coined by a Canadian who's seeing that, whereas we are to this day we still have our premier saying racism doesn't exist. That's a far-fetched thing that exists here, but and then we have to realize that there's so much, and then you wonder why we have no hope, and you wonder why when you get into that, you move the paradigm to a certain way, and then the next day you turn on the news and then you hear that. So I'll go back to the question, and I'll address what social services plays in breaking down the barriers. It's more than just bringing Black faces to the table. We have to look at more than just inclusion, because inclusion doesn't equal safety. Safety doesn't equal, safety is not the thing for Black people. We have to get to that outcome of belonging. Social services is that sector. We've always valued human connection, and we need to dig deeper now into humanizing that work for Black employees, for Black people. So it really means, do we actually believe that Black people belong within our organization? Do our leaders believe that? And we have to challenge, do we have, if we were to ask our leaders, would they believe that? And in many cases, we're given the disparity in the treatment of how we're being treated and how we're not being promoted, it would run against many of those ways. So the way that we are understood needs to be challenged, needs to be addressed. And we have to go beyond making space for Black people. We actually need brave spaces. We actually need people who are going to listen and act and enable me to have more than just a title. I need to be able to have power behind that title to make decisions. So if leaders that are going to move from being an ally to more so an abolitionist, so they're going to put their safety, their well-being, their health and freedom on the line, if that's what it takes to really get comfortable with Black people and get out of their discomfort. So the outcome that we all want to lean for is belonging, but pushing for that level of belonging within the social services sector, and making sure that we value human connection. And and given that, you know, we're a sector that we value, you know, going out in the community, meeting with the young people, the youth, but we're not valuing that in our own homes, in our own employee, in our own workspaces. So believing that people belong and ensuring that there's safety there for us.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think on every single thing that every one of you has said so far. And I like the way it's building up. Every single panelist is just adding on to it, and it's great. Sen, I'd want to hear your thoughts, please.
And I couldn't agree more. Like, you've all shared some great valuable points. And I think for me, as we conclude this, I think the key role that they have to play is humanizing our experiences, because most of the time, that's what's really lacking. I feel like we are just these numbers to the system, numbers. We can, wherever they see us, it's just the numbers. And I value so much the fact that data is very important, but at the same time, I also feel like the concept of data is somehow misconstrued. It's just like data, and then they just don't really want to understand the story behind the data and who actually is defining what data is. What's the meaning they attribute to data? Sometimes it's just like the colonial lens. It's like it's the way they want that to look like. I'm not trying to say data is bad. I totally agree, but it's not just number. It's our stories, it's our lives. It's not just like data as they portray it in the news, but it's our lives, it's our stories. And I think for me, that's the key part that oftentimes they miss within the social system. They just, we have this data, but it's not data. It's not a number. It's a human being. It's a human life. And I think for me, if they can get to a place where they can humanize our experiences, they can really accept us for who we truly are, and giving us the space to share our own story, so we can construct our own story, because our story has to be told by us. And if we're not given opportunities to tell our own story, then it allows somebody else to determine who are, or to define our own destiny, when we should be the ones defining our own destiny, which often is the case in social services. They just come because they think they know what you need, and they come and tell you, this is what we're supposed to be doing for you, therefore get it. But is it really, really what you need? And I think that's what oftentimes I think we need to change. If we need to have a system that really works for us, it has to be based on our own realities, on our own stories. It has to be, for example, the child welfare system. I think we know the concept that it takes a village to raise a child. Why can't we have that to make sure that our African people from African descent have the aunts and the grandmas, and it's doable, because that's what we know works very well for us, for people of African descent to be able to have better outcome for our family, for our children. It has worked for so many years, and it still works for us anywhere else. Why can't we have that in place, that system that really promotes the family, the community as a way of strengthening us? Because for us, we know, well, it's the best way to do it for the African people. If we can build that sense of family and community, bring the aunt, bring the uncle, bring everybody else within that context of supporting the smaller family, instead of coming up and snatch the child from the family because the mom or the dad can't do it well, is struggling with alcoholism or whatever the issues are. Raise a society, a family throughout that family, and they'll be able to do it well because it works everywhere. So for me, I think that's the key part that's really, they need to do. Build and trust that we are capable of raising our own children. We are capable of thinking for ourselves. We are capable of really being human beings. And we can do it because we have done it in the past. It's everywhere. You see it around us.
Thanks for sharing that, especially echo your points, especially as it pertains to ensuring that we can put an ADI lens to the data. And ideally, at least in my view, the key here is ensuring that we are in a position of influence, whether that be we've built our own system or we are at the table so that we can dictate it or interpret the data as we build it, and not necessarily in someone else's lens. And it should be within our lens that serves our needs, our communities, and so forth. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel. Those are very interesting thoughts from everyone, and I think very insightful panel in terms of some of the thoughts and some of the exchanges that we heard today. I think it was a great opportunity in enhancing that conversation, especially within social services. And perhaps maybe I'll just open up the final round for maybe closing thoughts. Whatever your closing thoughts may be, just feel free to share them, and I'll take this back to Ellen, and we'll go around and we'll call it a night.
First and foremost, I appreciate all the healthy conversations. I think it really helps in nurturing who I am as a person and as an individual. I would love to network with all of you. I am in the market for a new job. Like you guys were saying, I did leave my job. So I am personally right now doing the consulting, and it's been great. But yeah, if you guys know of any doors, I think please say my name. I think that's the biggest thing with networking, say people's names and spaces that you're in. So if you would like to explore anything more, I can always be found on LinkedIn. We can always connect. We can always chat, chop it up. But yeah, I appreciate all the realness, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys somewhere in my stratosphere in the near future, God's willing, post-COVID.
Thanks, Ellen.
Sorry, just fit in this essence of time, just jumping right in. Thank you for the invite. Again, kind of, I think the best part of this was being able to just vibe off of Ellen. So I just want to say thank you, Ellen, for your comments today. Leading out is always difficult, but you set us at a good space and a pace. I think that's important and real. So thank you for that. And returning the comment the comment you made earlier about group of men. It's nice to have a sister at the table with us that's able to say what the realness is, not trying to fit into some sort of odd box. So I think thank you for that, and thank you, Kevin, for this conversation. It's been it's not every Thursday afternoon I get to hide in a back room and talk about these kind of issues, so it's really cool that way. And I think I've sat next to Orville on these kind of things, I'd say 15 years now, Orville, something like that. We always tend to bounce at back. These things.
Yep.
I'm starting to feel a little tokenism every time I see you. But because it was Kevin that called us, I'm like, all right, maybe not this time.
Are we the only ones?
Exactly. I think Orville and I are always the guys at the table. So I appreciate being here and just being able to talk about it. And I hope that Kevin, this helps with what you're building. Because you have some other conversations with other Black leaders, so I feel honored that and humbled that was part of this journey that you're on. And we'll just give you the cheers to continue to cultivate these kind of spaces, because they're far and few between. So thank you for this.
Thank you again, and I really appreciate that. And it's you're not the first panelist that I've mentioned that, because we're also used to being called by our white colleagues for these types of conversations, and within the workspaces, especially where we're always the token one person in the room, and I'm sure most of you have been into countless of those situations, including myself. And what I wanted to do with this platform is ensure that we had a space for Black professionals, which I find is missing within our community in terms of a place where we can come and exchange those kind of thoughts and those perspectives, something that we may not have considered in the past that would be helpful within our journeys. And I think it's powerful when um, you don't have to be afraid of sounding offensive, to Ellen's point, and you're able to let down, let the guard down, and exchange your thoughts in a way that is going to be helpful to whoever's listening, and on this panel especially, and that's what I'm trying to create. It's just a space where we can actually come up with some really creative ways of looking at industries from a different perspective, as opposed to what we have internalized over the years. And I do believe we all become byproducts of our environment over time, whether we like it or not. But it's just a matter of degree of how much can you allow and how much can you not allow. I do want to hear your thoughts. So Mseno, your closing thoughts?
I think for me, yeah. So thank you again for having us, Kevin. This is great. So having such spaces, it's just I think the way to go. That the more of this we have, I hope the more awareness we create, and the more people get to know the ways we as Black people think, and wants to visualize the change we want to see, because sometimes people don't really know what what we think or what we intend to see happen. So this is great. So I'm so grateful to be part of this. Yeah, and I'm glad I could connect with all of you, the three of you, because I hadn't met with you before. So this is wonderful also to just have the connections, and I hope to connect and keep the discussion moving. So this is great.
Thank you. And Orville, your thoughts?
I definitely enjoyed the conversation. I think it was actually therapeutic for for all of us. I think to really have a safe space where we can really reflect and speak our truths without having to fear of our jobs, our safeties, our well-being, our own dignity. So thank you, Kevin, for giving us the space for that. And as we move forward, let's not stop here. If we can connect via email or wherever we can stay connected through LinkedIn, whatever avenues that we want to stay connected, let's stay connected. And the only thing I would say is move forward with centering your values and putting your health and your self well-being before everything, and acknowledging that this is an ongoing fight because of colonialism, because of years and years of racism, torture, dishonesty, and mistreatment, extractions. So we just have to really acknowledge that and prepare our kids for the future beyond that by in educating them within our own religious beliefs, as well as our own backgrounds in terms of speaking our truths with regards to Black leadership, Black life, and Black love. I think we don't talk about love enough. So I think we really have to look at and unpack what that means and celebrate Black love and Black people coming together.
Quick question. How often this is happening? Is this like a one-time thing?
No, actually, I do this every other Thursday. I started this last year in September.
Okay.
And last year we were doing this every week, but my workload just couldn't keep up with balancing both my current work with my clients and balancing this as well.
Okay.
And so I this year we shifted to every other week, so it's twice a month as opposed to every other Thursday, right? Which is it works best for me now in terms of balancing both. But I want to keep those conversations going. And with respect to connecting Black professionals, which I think we're still not doing very well in terms of connecting all Black experiences across Canada. I recently launched the Black Canadian Professionals Network, and the intention of that platform is to ensure that we can connect all these associations that you see, especially right across Ontario. I know so many out east, out west, and so forth. In my past, in my corporate space, I worked with aviation, so I travel the world and I travel Canada extensively. I've been to every single little town you can think of right across Canada, be it Gander out east or be it out west or in between. There's so many Black experiences that I came across that shocked me. This was me living in my Ontario bubble for many years. But that opened up my eyes to something else. And I think there's great opportunity in connecting Black professionals across Canada. And that's what I hope to do, especially with that network and through this platform as well. And this caught up a lot of heat, and there always a lot of requests in terms of the topic. And I think it's a great way of networking and of people actually even seeing something else that we bring to the table, because the conversations that you and I have probably had in our workspace in the past, and I don't want to assume anything, but at least in my experience, those really, I'll call them some very dumb stereotypes that I've come across, are sometimes alarming to me. And people are sometimes shocked to know that, okay, we do engage in industry A or industry B and industry C. They're very oblivious to it because they don't see it. And then again, you got to remember that the systems that have been created have not allowed those experiences to be shared with the public. And so I figured this is a great way for people to also recognize is also another thing that we can share, and many other experiences, and how we can enhance our system. And I think there's a lot more that we can learn from our collective experience. Ellen, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one final thing. Some of you have already said it, but I just wanted to clarify, there's no such thing as a safe space for anybody, but what we can try to do is create safer spaces, just so we are all aware of that. You don't know what triggers anybody. I went to a conference and somebody was triggered by bacon. So you just don't know, right? So safer spaces, no such thing as safe spaces. Y'all have a great night. My daughter is going to kill me, as I'm sure you guys saw her walking back and forth. She needs a lot of attention, so I'm going to give that to her now. But yes, it was lovely speaking with all of you.
We're not going to keep you waiting, and thanks for joining us, and we'll call it a good night. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.